Have you ever given your entire life to someone, only for them to throw it back in your face the moment they smell money? Marcus Vance thought he was untouchable. He thought he could cheat on his loyal wife, serve her divorce papers while her father lay dying, and walk away with half an empire he didn't build. He called her weak. He called her pathetic. He even brought his mistress to the funeral. But Marcus made one fatal calculation. He forgot that in the world of old money, the real power isn't in the bank account. It's in the fine print. You are not going to believe the trap Mina's father set from the grave. This is the story of the most brutal, satisfying karma in history. The rain in Seattle wasn't just rain. It was a relentless, grey sheet that seemed to wash away the color of everything it touched. For Mina Sterling Vance, it felt like the sky was mirroring the slow, agonizing disintegration of her world. She stood in the sterile hallway of St. Jude's Medical Center, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Behind her, in the ICU, the monitors beeped with the rhythmic, fading heartbeat of Arthur Sterling, the industrial tycoon, the philanthropist, but mostly her dad. He was the only family she had left. Mina checked her watch. It was 7:15 p.m. Marcus was late again. He had promised to be here. "I'll clear my schedule, Elle," he had said that morning, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror of their $10 million penthouse, a penthouse her father had bought them as a wedding gift. "It's Arthur. I wouldn't miss it." But Marcus wasn't here. Mina pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. She dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. She dialed his office. No answer. A sinking feeling, cold and heavy like a stone, settled in her stomach. It wasn't the first time. Lately, Marcus, the man she had supported when he was a broke law student, the man she had introduced to every major connection in the city, had been distant. He smelled of perfume that wasn't hers. He worked late on mergers that never seemed to make the news. Mrs. Vance? Mina turned. It wasn't a doctor. It was a process server, a short, balding man in a cheap raincoat who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Yes?" Mina whispered, confused. "I'm sorry to do this here, Ma'am, truly, but I've been instructed to ensure personal delivery." He shoved a thick manila envelope into her hands. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," a voice boomed from down the hall. Mina froze. She knew that voice. It was the voice she had fallen in love with 7 years ago. She looked up to see Marcus Vance striding toward her. But he didn't look like a grieving son-in-law. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, not a hair out of place. And he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm, looking bored and tapping away on a phone, was Jessica, his 24-year-old executive assistant. "Marcus!" Mina's voice cracked. She looked at the envelope, then back at him. "Here, now? My father is dying in that room." "Which is exactly why we're doing this now, Mina," Marcus said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He stopped 3 feet from her, not even looking at the ICU door. "We need to expedite the separation of assets before the estate complicates things." Mina felt the air leave her lungs. "You're doing this for the money? You're serving me divorce papers while my father is taking his last breaths so you can secure a payout?" "Don't be dramatic, Mina. It's unbecoming," Jessica chimed in, finally looking up. She smirked, a cruel, painted-on expression. "Marcus needs to focus on the future of Sterling Industries. He can't be dragged down by a grieving emotional anchor." You're sleeping with her," Mina whispered, the realization hitting her harder than the divorce papers. Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Sleeping with her? Mina, I'm in love with her. Jessica understands ambition. You? You've always been happy to just live off Daddy's money, You never had any drive. I built my firm. I made a name for myself." "You built your firm with my father's checkbook," Mina screamed, her composure finally snapping. Heads turned down the corridor. "I paid your student loans. I paid for your office lease. I introduced you to every client you have." Marcus stepped closer, looming over her. The charm was gone, replaced by a sneering arrogance. "And that's all you were, Mina. A stepping stone, a bank account with legs. But let's be real, you're boring. You're plain. You're 32 and you look 40. I'm a man in his prime. I deserve better." He pointed a manicured finger at the envelope in her hand. "My lawyers have drafted a settlement. I'm taking the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, and a 40% stake in your father's liquid assets as marital support for the years I managed his legal affairs. Sign it, and I won't drag your name through the mud." "I won't sign anything," Mina spat, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, you will," Marcus whispered, leaning in close, his cologne suffocating her. "Because if you don't, I'll contest the will. I'll tie up your father's estate in litigation for decades. You won't see a dime, and neither will that charity hospital he loves so much. Sign the papers, Mina. Be a good little girl one last time." Suddenly, the alarms in the ICU room behind Mina began to blare. A flatline tone pierced the air, a high-pitched, endless scream of a machine signaling the end. "Code Blue, room 304, a nurse shouted, rushing past them. Mina dropped the envelope. "Dad!" she screamed, turning to the door. Marcus didn't move to comfort her. He didn't look sad. He checked his Rolex. "Looks like the clock just ran out, Mina," he said coldly. "My lawyers will call you in the morning. Come on, Jessica. We have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin." As doctors rushed in to try and save the man who had been a father figure to Marcus for 7 years, Marcus Vance turned his back and walked away, his arm around his mistress, leaving his wife alone in the hallway to watch her father die. The funeral of Arthur Sterling was the event of the decade in New York City, though not for the reasons Mina wanted. It was a spectacle. The majestic St. Patrick's Cathedral was filled with senators, business tycoons, and celebrities. Mina sat in the front row, dressed in simple black, her face hidden behind a veil. She felt hollow. In the 3 days since her father passed, she hadn't slept. She had only cried and stared at the divorce papers Marcus had left on the hospital floor. She hadn't signed them. Not yet. The priest was delivering a moving eulogy about Arthur's kindness, his humble beginnings, and his love for his daughter. "Arthur Sterling was a man of integrity," the priest said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. He believed that character was the only currency that mattered. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral creaked open. It wasn't a quiet entrance. The sound of high heels clicking on the marble floor echoed sharply, cutting through the silence. Mina didn't turn around, but a murmur rippled through the congregation. A collective gasp. "Is that—" someone whispered. "The audacity," another murmured. Mina squeezed her eyes shut. She knew who it was. Marcus Vance walked down the center aisle, as if it were a red carpet. He wasn't wearing black. He was wearing a dark navy suit, pinstriped, aggressive, flashy, and beside him, holding his hand openly, was Jessica. She was wearing a black dress, but it was entirely inappropriate. Too short, too tight, with a neckline that plunged scandalously low for a funeral. She wore oversized sunglasses and looked around the cathedral as if judging the decor. They didn't sit in the back. Marcus marched right up to the front row, to the pew directly across the aisle from Mina. He nodded to the priest, gesturing for him to continue, as if he were the host of the event. Mina slowly turned her head. Through her veil she met Marcus's eyes. He winked, a subtle, arrogant wink that said, "I won." After the service, the burial took place at the Sterling family crypt. It was raining again. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus approached Mina, who was standing by the open grave, clutching a single white rose. "Touching ceremony," Marcus said, lighting a cigarette. "You shouldn't be here, Marcus," Mina said, her voice trembling with rage. "And bringing her? Have you no shame? Jessica is my partner now, Mina. She's part of the family, or will be, once I get my share." Marcus blew smoke into the damp air. "Speaking of which, have you read the updated terms? I decided I want the yacht too. Consider it payment for the emotional distress of dealing with your father's constant lectures on morality over the years." Jessica giggled, scrolling on her phone. "Babe, tell her about the house." "Right," Marcus smirked. "I'm moving into the Hamptons estate this weekend. Jessica wants to redecorate. The old Victorian style is so depressing. We're thinking modern. Lots of glass." Mina clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her palms. "That house has been in my family for 4 generations. You can't just take it." "I can, and I will," Marcus hissed, his face hardening. "I have the best lawyers in the city. Lawyers your father paid for, ironically. You have nothing, Mina. You never worked a day in your life. You don't know how to fight. I'm going to bleed this estate dry until you're begging me to stop. So sign the papers giving me the 50-50 split I asked for, or I go for 100% and leave you destitute." He flicked his cigarette butt onto the pristine grass of her father's grave. "See you at the will reading on Friday, sweetie. Try to look less funeral-ish. It puts people off." He grabbed Jessica's waist, and they laughed as they walked back to his Porsche, a car Mina had bought him for his 30th birthday. Mina stood alone in the rain, staring at the cigarette butt on her father's grave. Something inside her broke. But it wasn't her heart. It was the dam that had been holding back her rage. She reached down, picked up the cigarette butt, and crushed it in her bare hand until the embers burned her skin. She didn't feel the pain. "You think I'm weak, Marcus?" she whispered to the empty graveyard. "You think I'm just Arthur's little girl? You have no idea who I am." Friday arrived with a suffocating tension. The reading of Arthur Sterling's will was to take place at the offices of Thorne, Weathers and Dooley, one of the oldest and most prestigious law firms in Manhattan. The conference room was massive, lined with mahogany bookshelves, and offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. A long, polished table dominated the room. Mina arrived 5 minutes early. She wore a sharp, white blazer, a stark contrast to her mourning clothes. She had pulled her hair back into a tight, severe bun. She sat at the head of the table, her hands folded calmly. At exactly 10 a.m. the doors swung open. Marcus strode in, bringing an energy that sucked the air out of the room. He was followed not just by Jessica, but by his own personal legal team. 2 sharks in suits named Brad and Chad, known for nasty divorces. "Mina," Marcus nodded, taking the seat at the opposite end of the table, claiming the position of power. "I see you're prompt. Good." Jessica sat next to him, placing a designer handbag on the table. "Can we make this quick? We have a flight to Saint-Tropez at 3. "Saint-Tropez?" Mina asked coolly. "Celebration trip," Marcus smirked. "New beginnings." The door opened again, and Harrison Thorne walked in. Harrison was 70 years old, a man of few words and immense power. He had been Arthur Sterling's best friend and attorney for 40 years. He walked with a cane, but his eyes were sharp as flint. He sat in the center, between Mina and Marcus. He placed a thick leather binder on the table. He looked at Mina with a soft, sad smile, then turned his gaze to Marcus. His expression hardened into granite. Mr. Vance, Harrison said, his voice raspy but clear. I was under the impression that you and Mina were in the midst of divorce proceedings. We are, Marcus said, leaning back and putting his feet up on the rung of the chair. But as the divorce is not finalized, I am legally still her husband and entitled to be present. Furthermore, as Arthur's former legal consultant, I expect certain bequests were left to me directly. And the young woman? Harrison looked at Jessica over his spectacles. My emotional support, Marcus scoffed. Just read the damn will, Harrison. Let's get to the numbers. I know the old man was worth at least $4 billion. Let's see how the pie is sliced. Harrison adjusted his glasses. He opened the binder. The room went deathly silent. Arthur Sterling was a man of preparation, Harrison began. He updated his will 3 days before he died. He was lucid, sound of mind, and highly specific. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. 3 days before, he was in a coma. He woke up, Mina said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady. For 1 hour. He called Harrison, and we talked. Marcus frowned, looking between Mina and the lawyer. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but he shook it off. Whatever. He couldn't have changed much in an hour. Harrison cleared his throat. I will skip the minor charitable donations and proceed to the primary assets, the real estate portfolio, the liquidity, and the controlling interest in Sterling Industries. Marcus leaned forward, greedy anticipation practically dripping from him. Go on. First, Harrison read, to my only daughter, Mina, I leave my personal jewelry collection, the family photo albums, and the cottage in Vermont. Marcus let out a loud, barking laugh. The cottage? That rundown shack? And some photo albums? He looked at Mina with mock pity. Ouch. Daddy didn't trust you with the big bucks, huh? Mina didn't blink. She just stared at Marcus. Continue, Marcus waved his hand. Get to the part where the rest goes to the family trust, of which I am a trustee, as per the 2018 addendum. Actually, Harrison said, turning a page slowly. The 2018 addendum was revoked. There is a new clause regarding the bulk of the estate. Section 4, paragraph A, the Traitors Clause. The room went cold. Jessica stopped chewing her gum. The what? Marcus asked, his smile faltering. The Traitors Clause, Harrison repeated. Arthur knew about the affair, Marcus. He had you followed for 6 months. He knew about Jessica. He knew about the money you were siphoning from the firm to pay for her apartment. He knew everything. Marcus stood up, slamming his hands on the table. That's a lie. This is slander. I'll sue this firm into the ground. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Harrison commanded, his voice booming with unexpected power. I am not finished. Marcus slowly sat down, his face turning red. Fine. Read it. It doesn't matter. Marital assets are marital assets. I'm entitled to half of whatever Mina gets. That is the interesting part, Harrison said, a glint of amusement in his eyes. You see, Arthur didn't leave the billions to Mina. Not directly. Then who? Marcus demanded. Who gets the money? Harrison looked at Marcus, then at Jessica, and finally landed his gaze on Mina. To my beloved daughter, I leave the ownership of the Sterling box, Harrison read. A box? Marcus shouted. $4 billion and he left her a box? And, Harrison continued, raising his voice, to my son-in-law, Marcus Vance, in recognition of his ambition and desire to control the Sterling Empire, I leave the sole ownership and CEO position of Sterling Industries Global Logistics. Silence. Complete silence. Then Marcus started to laugh. It was a manic, triumphant laugh. He jumped up and hugged Jessica. Yes, yes. Did you hear that? He pointed at Mina. "He left me the company. The old fool actually did it. He respected me after all. He knew Mina couldn't run it." He looked at Harrison, grinning ear to ear. "I accept. I fully accept. I am the CEO and owner of Sterling Logistics. Put it in writing. I want it signed now." "Are you sure, Mr. Vance?" Harrison asked, his face unreadable. "You wish to accept the full ownership of the logistics division, independent of the rest of the estate?" "Absolutely," Marcus gloated. "That division is the heart of the company. It's worth $2 billion alone. Mina can keep her photo albums and her box. I won. I finally won." Mina stood up slowly. She picked up her purse. She looked at Marcus, who was celebrating, already popping a bottle of champagne his lawyers had presumptuously brought. "Congratulations, Marcus," Mina said softly. "You got exactly what you wanted. You got the company." "Don't be sore, sweetie," Marcus sneered, pouring a glass. "You can come work for me as a secretary if you need cash." Mina turned to Harrison. "I'm ready to go, Harrison. I believe we have work to do." "Indeed," Harrison said, closing the binder. As Mina walked to the door, she stopped and looked back at Marcus one last time. "Enjoy the company, Marcus. Dad always said you had to be careful what you wished for." She walked out, leaving Marcus to toast his victory. He had no idea that the ink on the paper he was about to sign wasn't just a transfer of ownership. It was a death warrant. The champagne tasted like victory. Marcus sat on the plush velvet sofa in the penthouse living room, his penthouse now, he thought smugly, looking out over Central Park. It was 3 hours after the will reading. Jessica was already in the walk-in closet, loudly planning which of Mina's old clothes she was going to throw out to make room for her new wardrobe. "Can you believe the old bastard?" Marcus laughed into his phone, talking to his lead lawyer, Brad. "He tried to cut me out, got sentimental at the last second, and handed me the crown jewel. Sterling Logistics. The revenue streams on that division alone are insane." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Brad? You there? I said we need to start the transfer process immediately. I want my name on the letterhead by Monday." "Marcus." Brad's voice was strained. It lacked its usual arrogant punch. "Where are you right now?" "At the penthouse." "Why? You sound like someone died." "Marcus, listen to me very carefully. Did you sign the acceptance papers Harrison slid across the table? The ones accepting sole, independent ownership of Sterling Global Logistics?" "Of course I did. I wasn't going to let Mina change her mind. I signed it, dated it, and practically kissed it." "Why?" He heard Brad audibly inhale. "You need to come to the office. Now. Don't bring Jessica." A cold sliver of apprehension pierced Marcus's alcohol-fueled haze. "What is it? Just tell me." We missed something. In the haste to secure the asset, we didn't review the attached schedules in the appendix of the will, the schedules detailing the liabilities of the logistics division." Marcus scoffed, loosening his tie. "Liabilities? Every company has debt, Brad. It's leverage. Arthur was practically debt-phobic. How bad could it be? A few $100 million? "Marcus," Brad whispered. "It's $3.2 billion. Marcus dropped the phone. It tumbled onto the Persian rug, Brad's tiny voice still squawking from the speaker. "What?" Jessica walked out of the closet, holding up a vintage Chanel jacket. "Babe, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus scrambled for the phone. "Repeat that," he choked out. $3.2 billion in secured debt, Brad said, his voice trembling. Arthur leveraged the entire logistics division to finance a massive infrastructure project in Southeast Asia 2 years ago. The project failed quietly 6 months ago. The construction halted. The governments involved are suing for breach of contract. Marcus felt the room spinning. "But," But why didn't I know this? I was his legal consultant. He bypassed you, Brad explained. He used an outside firm for those deals. Marcus, it gets worse. The loans, they had a change of control clause. What does that mean? Marcus screamed, sweat beading on his forehead. It means that upon the death of Arthur Sterling, if ownership transferred to anyone outside the immediate bloodline trust, i.e., to you directly, the full amount becomes immediately due and payable. The banks just got the notification of the will reading. They are calling the loans, Marcus, today. So, pay them. Use the company accounts. There is no cash in the company accounts, Marcus. Arthur emptied the liquidity into the charitable trusts right before he died. The logistics division is an empty shell carrying $3 billion of toxic debt. And because you signed for sole independent ownership outside of the main estate protection, they aren't just coming for the company assets. Brad paused, the silence deafening. They're coming for you, Marcus. You personally guaranteed the debt by accepting the asset as is. They're going to seize everything. The penthouse, your personal accounts, your car, the Hamptons house you just moved into. You're not a CEO, Marcus. You're the owner of the biggest bankruptcy crater in New York history. Marcus looked up dazedly. Jessica was staring at him, the Chanel jacket drooping in her hand. What is he saying, Marcus? Her voice was sharp, accusing. What does he mean, seize everything? It's a mistake, Marcus stammered, his face grey. Harrison tricked me. The old man tricked me from the grave. His phone started buzzing incessantly. Incoming call. J.P. Morgan Chase, Risk Management Division. Another call. Deutsche Bank. Asset recovery. Jessica saw the caller IDs. She dropped the jacket on the floor. The look of adoration on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. You're broke, she stated flatly. You don't get the billions. You get the debt. Jess, baby, wait, I can fix this. We just need to sue Mina. We need to. We? Jessica laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. She grabbed her purse off the table. There is no we, Marcus. I didn't sign up to be the girlfriend of a guy living in a cardboard box. I have a flight to Saint-Tropez to catch, alone. Jessica, wait, I love you. She didn't even look back. The elevator doors pinged open, and she was gone, taking the last shred of Marcus Vance's ego with her. Marcus stood alone in the multi-million-dollar penthouse that he now realized wasn't an asset, but a tomb. He walked to the window, staring down at the city that had adored him just hours ago. The trap had snapped shut, and he had walked right into it with a smile on his face. While Marcus's world was imploding 40 stories above Manhattan, Mina was sitting in the subterranean vault of the private bank Arthur Sterling had used for 50 years. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and dust. Harrison sat across from her at a small metal table. Between them sat the Sterling box. It wasn't ornate. It was a simple, fireproof lockbox made of heavy steel, scarred from decades of use. Mina had stopped crying days ago. Now she just felt a strange, icy calm. Are you ready, Mina? Harrison asked softly. I am. Harrison produced a small, intricate key from his vest pocket and slid it over to her. Mina took a deep breath, inserted the key, and turned it. The heavy lid clicked open. She expected diamonds. She expected stacks of cash. She expected sentimental trinkets. Instead, the box contained only 3 manila folders and a small black USB drive. Mina looked at Harrison, confused. This is it. This is the inheritance. The greatest wealth, Mina, is control, Harrison said. Arthur knew Marcus would go for the flashy things, the titles, the real estate, the operating companies. Marcus sees wealth as things he can buy. Your father saw wealth as levers he could pull. Harrison pointed to the first folder. Open it. Mina opened the folder. It contained complex stock certificates for a company she had never heard of, Chimera Holdings, LLC. What is this? 2 years ago, when Arthur first discovered the affair, Harrison explained, he didn't get angry. He got busy. He created Chimera Holdings. It's a shell company, completely anonymous, registered overseas. He moved all of his liquid cash, billions of dollars, into this holding company. Mina's eyes widened. So the estate isn't broke? Far from it. The estate is richer than ever. But on paper, in the US, it looks cash poor. And here is the brilliant part, Mina. You own 100% of Chimera Holdings. Mina touched the certificates. Billions of dollars, hidden in plain sight in a rusty box. Now the second folder, Harrison prompted, a grim smile playing on his lips. Mina opened it. It contained loan documents, thick, dense agreements between Sterling Global Logistics and various international banks. I don't understand, Mina said, scanning the pages. Look at who bought the debt, Mina. Look at the assignee. She turned to the last page. Her breath caught in her throat. The debt that was currently crushing Marcus, the $3.2 billion that was about to trigger the seizure of everything he owned, had been quietly purchased 6 months ago by Chimera Holdings, LLC. Oh my God, Mina whispered, the realization hitting her with physical force. Dad didn't just saddle Marcus with debt to the banks. No, Harrison confirmed. Arthur bought the debt, all of it. Every cent Marcus owes, he owes to Chimera Holdings. He owes it to you. Mina sat back, stunned by the sheer magnitude of the trap. Marcus wasn't just bankrupt. He was beholden to the wife he had tormented. She held the leash. And the third folder? Mina asked, her voice steadier now, a new strength rising within her. Harrison placed his hand on the third folder. His expression turned grave. This was Arthur's insurance policy, in case the debt wasn't enough to destroy Marcus, in case Marcus tried to fight dirty. Mina opened it. It wasn't financial documents. It was surveillance photographs, bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands with Marcus's name on them, transcripts of wiretaps. What am I looking at? Proof, Harrison said. Proof that for the last 5 years, Marcus has been embezzling money from your father's charitable foundations to fund his lavish lifestyle and his affair with Jessica. He stole millions from orphans and hospitals, Mina. It's federal wire fraud, tax evasion, and grand larceny. It's 20 years in federal prison, minimum. Mina looked at the photos. Marcus and Jessica on yachts, laughing, spending stolen money while her father was sick. She looked at the USB drive. The digital copies, Harrison said, ready to be sent to the U.S. Attorney's office at your command. Mina closed the box. The clang of the steel lid echoed in the small vault. She wasn't the same woman who had stood crying in the rain outside the hospital. That woman was gone, buried along with her father. She stood up, picking up the heavy steel box. It felt good in her hands. It felt like a weapon. Harrison, Mina said, her voice icy cold and razor-sharp. Marcus said he wanted a divorce. He wanted to expedite the separation of assets. Yes, he was quite insistent. Mina smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good. Let's give him exactly what he asked for. Call his lawyers. Tell them I'm ready to negotiate the terms of his surrender. By Monday morning, the dismantling of Marcus Vance's life was moving with the terrifying efficiency of a wrecking ball. It started at 7:00 a.m. at the airport Hilton. Marcus had tried to check out, but his Platinum American Express card, the one he used to buy watches that cost more than most people's cars, was declined. Then his Visa, then his debit card. "I'm sorry, sir," the clerk said, looking at him with suspicion. The system says card reported stolen or account frozen for all of them. Marcus had to leave his Omega watch as collateral just to leave the hotel. He hailed a cab, paying with the crumpled cash he found in his jacket pocket, and headed for the one place he thought was still his sanctuary, Sterling Tower. He stood in the lobby of the glass and steel monolith, a building that cast a shadow over half a block of Manhattan. He was wearing the same suit he had worn on Friday at the will reading. It was rumpled now, stained with coffee, and he smelled of stale sweat and desperation. He looked less like a master of the universe and more like a man running from a ghost. He marched toward the private elevator bank, the one reserved for the C-suite. "Mr. Vance!" A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. Marcus spun around, ready to snap. It was Miller, the head of building security. A massive man Marcus had ignored for 5 years, occasionally threatening to fire him for breathing too loud. "Get your hands off me, Miller," Marcus snarled, shaking him off. "I'm going to my office." "I can't let you do that, sir," Miller said, his voice flat and unyielding. He stepped in front of the elevator doors, blocking the path. "Your badge has been deactivated." "Deactivated?" Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that drew the attention of the morning rush crowd. Former employees, interns, receptionists, people Marcus had bullied or treated like furniture, stopped to watch. "I own this company. I have the papers. I signed the deal on Friday. I am the CEO of Sterling Logistics." "Actually," Miller said, looking down at a clipboard with agonizing slowness, "Sterling Logistics is currently in receivership due to immediate default on secured loans. The creditor has appointed an interim administrator. The building is on lockdown for all former executives." Former. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "I am not former. I demand to speak to the administrator. Who is it? Is it the bank? I can talk to them. I can cut a deal. I know where the bodies are buried in this company." Miller tapped his earpiece, listening to a voice on the other end. He looked at Marcus with a strange expression, something between pity and deep satisfaction. "The creditor is upstairs right now, in the executive suite. She says she's willing to grant you a 5-minute audience." "She?" Marcus straightened his tie, a flicker of delusional hope igniting in his chest. A woman. He could work with a woman. He had charmed his way into Arthur Sterling's life. He could charm some faceless corporate liquidator. He would turn on the Vance magnetism. He would explain that this was all a misunderstanding, that he was the victim of a clerical error. "Send me up," Marcus said, smoothing back his greasy hair, "and get me a coffee. Black." Miller didn't move to get coffee. He just swiped his master key card. "Top floor. Good luck, Mr. Vance. You're going to need it." The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like an ascent to the gallows, though Marcus tried to convince himself it was a throne room. He stared at his reflection in the mirrored doors. He practiced his smile. Confident, approachable, the grieving son-in-law. "I can fix this," he told himself. "I just need to find the angle." The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Marcus stepped out, ready to launch into his speech, but the words died in his throat. The executive suite had been transformed. The dark, brooding, modern art Marcus had installed weeks ago, the jagged metal sculptures and aggressive abstract paintings, was gone. In their place hung the original classic oil portraits Arthur Sterling had loved. The landscapes of the Hudson Valley, the portraits of industry titans. The office didn't look like a shark tank anymore. It looked like a fortress of tradition. Sitting behind the massive oak desk wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a bank representative. It was Mina. She was wearing a tailored navy dress that screamed power, not submission. She wasn't hunched over. She wasn't crying. She was leaning back in the leather chair, his chair, reading a file, holding a fountain pen like it was a dagger. Harrison stood by the window, silent as a sentinel, watching Marcus with cold, dead eyes. Marcus stopped in the doorway, his brain misfiring. "Mina, what are you doing here? Get out of the chair. I have a meeting with the representative from Chimera Holdings." Mina didn't look up immediately. She turned a page, made a slow, deliberate note, and then, finally, raised her eyes. They were glacial. "Hello, Marcus," she said calmly. "Take a seat." "I don't have time for your games, Mina," Marcus shouted, his patience fraying. He marched toward the desk. "I need to meet with the people who bought the debt. I need to explain that the default is a mistake." "You are meeting with the people who bought the debt," Mina interrupted, her voice slicing through his bluster like a razor blade. Marcus froze mid-step. He looked at Harrison, then back at Mina. He let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. "What? You? Don't be ridiculous. You inherited a box of photos and a cottage." "I inherited Chimera Holdings," Mina corrected him, placing her pen down. "I own the debt, Marcus, all $3.2 billion of it. I am the bank. I am the creditor. And you are in default." Marcus stumbled back, his legs hitting the guest chair. He collapsed into it, the air rushing out of him. You did this? You bought the loans?" "Dad did this," Mina said. "He knew you, Marcus. He knew your greed was your blind spot. He knew you'd take the company without checking the books. You signed the papers. You accepted the debt personally, which means I don't just own the company anymore. I own you." Marcus stared at her, his mind racing for an exit, sweat beading on his forehead. Fine. You win. Take the company back. I'll sign it over right now. Just forgive the personal guarantee and let me go. I'll leave New York. I'll go to LA. I'll start over." "It's not that simple," Mina said, closing the file. "See, taking the company back covers the debt, but it doesn't cover the crime." "Crime?" Marcus swallowed hard. "What crime?" Mina picked up a small black USB drive from the desk and held it up. The light caught the metal casing. "Harrison and I have been very busy this weekend," she said. "We did a forensic audit of the Sterling Charitable Foundation, specifically the Orphanage Fund and the Cancer Research Grant." She tossed the USB drive onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Marcus. "You took $4 million over 3 years, Marcus. You disguised it as consulting fees and funneled it into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands to pay for your gambling debts and your mistress." Marcus went pale. That was creative accounting. I was entitled to fees. It's a gray area. The FBI calls it wire fraud, tax evasion, and grand larceny. Harrison spoke up from the window, his voice raspy and final. "We have the wire transfers, we have the emails, and we have the witness testimony." "Witness?" Marcus whispered. Mina leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "We called Jessica yesterday. We told her that as your executive assistant, she was facing charges as an accessory to fraud, 10 years in prison." Marcus's eyes widened. "Jessica. She wouldn't. She loves me." Mina let out a short, humorless laugh. "She sang like a canary, Marcus. She gave us everything to save her own skin. The passwords, the account numbers, the dates. She's currently in Saint-Tropez, cooperating with the district attorney via video link. She sold you out for a plea deal before the plane even landed." The betrayal hit Marcus harder than the bankruptcy. The woman he had destroyed his marriage for had turned on him in a heartbeat. He was truly alone. "So here is your reality, Marcus," Mina said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Option A. I pick up this phone and call the U.S. attorney. I hand over this drive. You go to federal prison for 20 years. You lose your license to practice law. You become inmate number 8472. Marcus was shaking now, real tears forming in his eyes, tears of self-pity. Mina, please. I was your husband. We had a life. Doesn't that mean anything? You destroyed that life, she said, her voice trembling with a sudden surge of suppressed rage. You mocked me while my father lay dying. You brought your mistress to his funeral. You called me weak. You called me pathetic. Don't you dare appeal to my mercy. She took a deep breath, composing herself back into the Ice Queen. Option B, she continued. You sign a full confession. You sign over every asset you have left to the estate, the watch on your wrist, the car, the offshore accounts. You leave New York today. You never contact me. You never speak about the Sterling family, and you never practice law again. You disappear. If you do that, she pointed to the USB drive, this stays in the box, and you stay free. Poor but free. Marcus looked at the USB drive, then at the woman he had underestimated for 7 years. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He knew she wasn't bluffing. The mousy, quiet wife he had walked all over was gone. In her place was a titan of industry. He looked at his shaking hands. He had walked into this room hoping to negotiate a deal. Now he was negotiating for his freedom. I'll sign, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. I'll sign everything. Good, Mina said. She didn't smile. She just dropped a heavy legal document in front of him. Harrison has the pen, she said, turning her chair back to the window, dismissing him like he was nothing more than a bad investment. Make it legible, Marcus. It's the last time your signature will ever matter. 6 months had passed since the doors of the penthouse slammed shut on Marcus Vance. New York City was thawing into spring. The grey slush of winter was gone, replaced by the crisp, golden light that bounced off the skyscrapers of Midtown. On the 40th floor of Sterling Tower, the atmosphere had changed, too. The air, once thick with the stale cigar smoke of the old guard, now buzzed with a terrified electric efficiency. Mina Sterling sat at the head of the mahogany conference table. She wasn't wearing the soft, shapeless cardigans Marcus used to mock. She was dressed in a sharp, slate-grey power suit, her hair cut into a sleek, angular bob that framed a face which had learned how to hide fear. Around the table sat 12 men, the board of directors. Most of them had served under her father. All of them had doubted her. Mina, interrupted George Henderson, a man who had been trying to buy the company for a decade. He leaned back, clicking his pen dismissively. With all due respect, the logistics division is still recovering from the debt incident. Pivoting to renewable shipping routes now is a fantasy. It's too expensive. Your father would have never risked the capital. The room went silent. The old Mina would have shrunk back. She would have looked at Harrison for help. The new Mina didn't blink. She slowly closed the file in front of her. You're right, George, she said, her voice deceptively soft. My father wouldn't have risked the capital. But my father didn't spend the last 6 months renegotiating the fuel contracts with the Norwegian suppliers, saving us 15% on overhead. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward him. And he certainly didn't uncover that you've been shorting sterling stock through a shell company in Delaware, betting on my failure. Henderson's face went the color of ash. That is preposterous. It's documented, Mina said, her voice turning to steel. Harrison has the SEC filings ready. You can resign today, George, and keep your pension. Or you can stay, and I'll have security escort you out in front of the entire floor. Your choice. Henderson looked at the paper. His hand trembled. Without a word, he stood up, gathered his things, and walked out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut. Mina looked around the table at the remaining directors. Anyone else think I'm not up to the task? Silence. Absolute, respectful silence. Good, Mina said, checking her watch. Meeting adjourned. I have a company to run. As she walked back to her office, her legs felt heavy. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving behind the exhaustion of 18-hour days. She hadn't taken a vacation since the funeral. She had scrubbed the company clean, department by department. She had fired the sycophants Marcus had hired. She had earned her place, but the cost was high. She entered her office, the executive suite that still smelled faintly of her father's leather chair. Ms. Sterling? It was David, her new executive assistant. He was young, eager, and terrifyingly competent, a stark contrast to the assistants Marcus used to hire based on their skirt length. The Q2 projections are on your desk, David said. And this came in the mail. Security screened it. It's safe, but it's personal. He handed her a plain white envelope. It was crinkled, as if it had been carried in a pocket for days before being mailed. There was no return address, just a postmark, Omaha, Nebraska. Mina took it. She knew the handwriting. It was jagged, rushed. She waited until David left the room before opening it. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the empire she had saved. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper. Mina, I don't know if you'll even read this. You probably shouldn't. I'm working at a hardware store now. I stock shelves. My boss is a 20-year-old kid who yells at me if I'm 2 minutes late. I live in a basement apartment that smells like mold. I don't have a car. I take the bus. I saw you on the news last week. The interview about the charity expansion. You looked incredible. You looked like him. Like Arthur. I have a lot of time to think now. I think about the penthouse. I think about the way I used to talk to you. I realized something last night, sitting in the dark, because I couldn't pay the electric bill. I never hated you, Elle. I hated that you were good, and I was just hungry. I wanted to be a king so bad, I burned down the only castle that would have me. I'm not asking for money. I know the deal. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. Don't write back. Mina read the letter twice. She remembered the man who had worn Italian suits and screamed at waiters. She remembered the man who had checked his Rolex while her father died. She tried to summon the anger that had fueled her for months. She tried to feel the heat of the betrayal. But there was nothing. The rage had burned itself out, leaving only a cool, quiet indifference. Marcus Vance wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a sad man in Nebraska, stocking shelves and regretting the life he threw away. He was a ghost, and ghosts couldn't hurt her. Mina walked over to the shredder next to her desk. She didn't hesitate. She fed the letter into the machine. The grinding noise was loud in the quiet office, turning Marcus's apology into yellow confetti. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt free. There was a knock on the door. Harrison poked his head in. He looked older, tired, but his eyes were bright. "The car is ready, Mina," he said gently. "Are you ready to go?" Yes. They didn't go to a business meeting. The black town car wove through the city traffic, heading north until they reached the quiet, green expanse of the cemetery. The rain held off today. The grass was vibrant green. Mina stood before the marble headstone. Arthur Sterling, beloved father, titan of industry. She knelt down and placed a fresh bouquet of white lilies on the stone. She traced the letters of his name. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "I cleaned house. The debt is gone. The foundation is whole again. And Marcus, Marcus is gone. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, almost like a sigh of relief. I used to think you left me the box because you didn't trust me with the money, she said, tears finally stinging her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of release. But I get it now. You didn't leave me the money because you knew I didn't need it to be powerful. You gave me the weapon because you knew I was the only one strong enough to pull the trigger. She stood up, wiping her eyes. She straightened her blazer. She felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of being Arthur's daughter or Marcus's wife was gone. She was just Mina. She walked back to the car where Harrison was waiting. He held the door open for her. "Where to now, Miss Sterling?" Harrison asked. Mina looked back at the city skyline, gleaming in the distance. The skyscrapers looked like jagged teeth, but she wasn't afraid of being bitten anymore. She was the one with the teeth now. "Take me to the office, Harrison." She smiled, a genuine, dangerous smile. "We have an acquisition to finalize. I think it's time Sterling Industries started expanding again." Harrison chuckled, a dry, proud sound. "Your father would be terrified of you, my dear." "Good," Mina said, sliding into the car. "That's exactly how I like it." As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of life, Mina Sterling didn't look back. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Karma isn't just about what you deserve. It's about what you take. And she had taken it all. So, what is the lesson here? Marcus Vance thought power came from bullying, cheating, and grabbing what wasn't his. He mistook Mina's kindness for weakness and her silence for stupidity. But he forgot the most important rule of the jungle. The most dangerous predator isn't the one roaring, it's the one waiting in the tall grass. Mina showed us that true strength isn't about how loud you can shout. It's about how smart you can fight when your back is against the wall. She turned her pain into power and her grief into a strategy. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate justice and turning the tables, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that karma is real, and hit subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments, would you have sent Marcus to jail, or was stripping him of everything a better punishment? I'll see you in the next video. They called her a gold digger. They called her useless. When Sterling Vance threw his wife, Alice, out on the street for a younger model, he thought he had won. He thought she was nothing. But he forgot one thing. His father, the billionaire patriarch Arthur Vance, saw everything. 3 years of silence. 3 years of humiliation. It all comes down to this moment. The will reading. The room is full of sharks, but the person holding the bait isn't who you think it is. You are not ready for the twist in paragraph 4. This is the story of how the discarded wife walked in with nothing and walked out owning them all. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry, but Sterling Vance didn't care. He sat at the mahogany table in the center of the frantic buzz of the courtroom, checking his Rolex. It was a Submariner, a gift Alice had saved 3 years to buy him for their 10th anniversary. Now, it just looked like another piece of armor on a man who had become a stranger. "Ms. Keene," the judge said, his voice devoid of sympathy. He used her maiden name. It felt like a slap. "You understand the terms of the prenuptial agreement? You are leaving this marriage with the assets you entered it with, which, according to the court's audit, amounts to—" He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the ledger. "A 2014 Honda Civic and $4,000 in a joint checking account." Alice looked at her hands. They were trembling. She didn't look at Sterling. She couldn't bear to see the smirk she knew was plastered across his handsome, chiseled face. "I understand, Your Honor," she whispered. "Speak up," Sterling's lawyer barked. It was Marcus Thorne, a man known in New York legal circles as the Rottweiler. He cost $5,000 an hour, and Sterling had hired him just to make a point. "I understand," Alice said, her voice shaking but louder this time. Sterling finally looked up from his watch. He leaned over, the scent of his expensive cologne, Santal 33, another suggestion of hers, wafting over to her side of the table. "Don't look so tragic, Alice," he hissed, low enough that the judge couldn't hear. "You got 10 years of the high life. You lived in my penthouse, wore my name, and rubbed shoulders with the elite. Consider this the end of your scholarship." Alice finally turned to him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. "I helped you build Vance Logistics, Sterling. I managed the books when we were working out of your garage. I handled your mother's hospice care when you were too busy networking." "Does that mean nothing?" Sterling laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You answered phones, Alice. You were a glorified secretary I slept with. And now? Now I need a partner who fits the brand, someone with pedigree." He glanced toward the back of the courtroom. Tiffany St. Clair was sitting there, 23 years old, the daughter of a minor oil tycoon and an Instagram model with 2 million followers. She popped gum, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. She was the brand. "Case closed." The judge banged the gavel. The walk out of the courthouse was the longest of Alice's life. The paparazzi were there, tipped off by Sterling's PR team. Flashbulbs blinded her. "Alice, how does it feel to be replaced? Is it true you tried to extort Mr. Vance? Look at the coat. Is that last season?" Sterling emerged moments later, Tiffany on his arm. The cameras swiveled to them like sunflowers to a toxic sun. Sterling kissed Tiffany, a deep, performative dip that made the photographers roar. Alice stood by the curb, clutching her plastic bag of personal effects. It began to rain. Not a movie drizzle, but a cold, hard New York downpour. A black limousine pulled up. For a second, Alice thought it might be Sterling, offering a final shred of mercy, perhaps a ride to the subway. The window rolled down. It was Sterling. "Move, Alice," he said. "You're blocking the shot." The car sped off, splashing muddy gutter water onto her only good coat. She stood there, shivering, watching the taillights fade into the grey city. She had no job, no home, no family. Her parents had passed years ago. She was 34 years old, and according to the man she had loved for a decade, she was absolutely nothing. But as she wiped the mud from her cheek, Alice didn't cry. A strange, cold clarity settled in her chest. "Nothing?" she whispered to the rain. "You think I'm nothing? Okay, Sterling, I'll be nothing. Until I'm everything." 3 years later, the clatter of silverware was deafening. Le Jardin was one of those Upper East Side bistros where a salad cost $40 and the waiters were treated like furniture. Alice adjusted her apron. Her feet throbbed. She had been on a double shift since 6 a.m. In the last 3 years, she hadn't become a CEO. She hadn't started a rival empire. Real life wasn't a movie montage. Real life was hard. She worked 2 jobs, shifts at Le Jardin and night cleaning at a law firm downtown. She lived in a studio apartment in Queens that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage, but it was hers. She paid her rent. She read books from the library, and she kept tabs. Every Sunday, she went to the public library and read the financial columns. Vance Logistics stock soars. Sterling Vance and Tiffany St. Clair, the power couple of the Hamptons. Arthur Vance, founder of Vance Global, hospitalized. That last headline had appeared 2 days ago. Arthur. Sterling's father. Arthur was the only one who had ever been kind to her. When Sterling was screaming about a missing tie or a cold dinner, Arthur would sit Alice down, pour her a tea, and talk to her about history, about strategy, about the importance of patience. "The loudest man in the room is the weakest," he used to say. Alice missed him. She wanted to send flowers, but she knew Sterling would just throw them in the trash. "Table 4 needs water, Alice. Move it." The manager, a sweaty man named Henri, snapped his fingers in her face. Alice grabbed the crystal pitcher and headed to table 4, the VIP booth in the corner. She kept her head down, a habit she had formed to avoid recognition. Not that anyone recognized her anymore. The glamour of the Vance name had washed off her long ago. She wore no makeup, her hair was tied in a severe bun, and her uniform was 2 sizes too big. She approached the table. "And then I told him, if you want the contract, you kiss the ring," a familiar voice boomed. Alice froze. The water pitcher trembled in her hand. It was Sterling. He was heavier now, his face puffy from too much scotch and rich food, but the arrogance was untouched. Beside him sat Tiffany, looking bored, picking at a lobster tail. Across from them were 2 men in suits, investors likely. Alice's heart hammered against her ribs. Just pour the water, walk away. She leaned in, pouring the water into the first investor's glass. "Excuse me," Tiffany said, her voice shrill. "I asked for sparkling. This is tap. I can smell the chlorine." "I apologize, Ma'am," Alice said, keeping her voice low. "I'll replace it immediately." Sterling stopped talking. He turned slowly. The silence at the table was instant. He squinted at her, his eyes narrowing. "Wait a minute," Sterling said. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "No, it can't be." He grabbed Alice's wrist. She tried to pull back, but his grip was tight. "Look at this, gentlemen," Sterling announced, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. "Do you know who this is? This is my ex-wife." The investors looked uncomfortable. Tiffany giggled. "Oh my God, Sterling, it is her. She looks dreadful." "Alice!" Sterling laughed, releasing her wrist to gesture at her attire. "From the penthouse to the apron. I told you, didn't I? I told you that without me, you were 0. Look at you. Serving water to the man who made you." "Please let me do my job, Mr. Vance," Alice said, her dignity hanging by a thread. "Job? Is that what we call this?" He pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and crumpled it up. He dropped it into the pitcher of water she was holding. "There, a tip. Go buy yourself some face cream. You look tired." The restaurant went silent. Other diners were watching. Henri, the manager, rushed over. "Is there a problem, Mr. Vance?" "Yes, Henri," Sterling said, leaning back. "Your waitress is upsetting my wife. She has bad energy. Get her out of my sight." "Alice, go to the kitchen," Henry hissed. "Now!" Alice turned, her face burning. She walked away, the sound of Sterling's laughter chasing her through the swinging doors. She stood over the sink in the back, gripping the stainless steel edge until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream. She wanted to break every plate in the kitchen. The loudest man in the room is the weakest. Arthur's voice echoed in her mind. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She wasn't supposed to check it during work, but she needed a distraction. It was a call from a number she didn't recognize, a 212 area code, a landline. "Hello?" she answered, her voice thick with suppressed tears. "Is this Alice Keene?" A formal, grave voice spoke. "Yes, this is James P. Sullivan, personal attorney to Arthur Vance." Alice's stomach dropped. "Arthur? Is he—" "Mr. Vance passed away an hour ago, Alice. I'm so sorry." Alice closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. The only family she had left, in a way, was gone. "I'm calling because of the will," Sullivan continued. "The reading is tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the Vance estate. Attendance is mandatory." "Mr. Sullivan, I can't go there," Alice whispered. "Sterling will serve me up on a platter. We're divorced. I have no claim. Why would Arthur want me there?" "The instructions were specific, Ms. Keene. Mandatory attendance for all named parties." "And Alice?" "Yes." "You aren't just a guest. Arthur was very clear. The reading cannot begin without you." Alice looked at the swinging door. She could hear Sterling out there, ordering a $3,000 bottle of wine, celebrating his life, oblivious to his father's death. "Okay," Alice said, her voice hardening. "I'll be there." She hung up. She took off her apron. "Where do you think you're going?" Henri shouted as she walked toward the exit. "If you walk out, you're fired." Alice turned. For the first time in 3 years, she stood up straight. "I quit, Henri, and tell Table 4. The water was on the house." The Vance estate in the Hamptons was a sprawling Gothic mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. It sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, grey stone against a grey sky. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Maybachs. And then there was the Uber that dropped Alice off at the gate because the driver wasn't on the security list. Alice walked the quarter-mile up the driveway. She wore her best outfit, a black blazer she had bought from a thrift store and tailored herself, and a pair of clean black trousers. She looked professional, but compared to the crowd gathering at the front steps, she looked like the help. She reached the massive oak doors just as Sterling and Tiffany were exiting a sleek silver Aston Martin. Sterling was wearing black, but he didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a man about to inherit an empire. He was on his phone. "Sell the logistics division in Asia. Yeah, today. Before the market realizes the old man is dead. I want liquid cash for the yacht acquisition." He hung up and spotted Alice. He stopped dead. "You have got to be kidding me," Sterling groaned. "Security." 2 burly men in suits stepped forward. "Who let the trash in?" Tiffany sneered. She was wearing a black veil that looked like it cost more than Alice's annual rent. "This is a private family event. Are you here to beg for scraps?" "I was invited," Alice said calmly. She clutched her handbag tight. "Invited? By who? The ghost?" Sterling laughed. "My father hasn't spoken to you in 3 years. I made sure of that. I blocked your number on his phone myself." Alice felt a chill. So Arthur hadn't ignored her. Sterling had intercepted everything. "Get her off the property," Sterling commanded the guards. "Now." One of the guards reached for Alice's arm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." A deep voice cut through the air. James P. Sullivan stood in the doorway. He was an older man, 70 perhaps, with silver hair and eyes like flint. He was the most feared contract lawyer in the state, Arthur's oldest friend and confidant. "Mr. Sullivan," Sterling switched to his charming persona instantly. "I was just removing a trespasser. My ex-wife seems to think she can crash my father's funeral proceedings." "She is not crashing, Sterling," Sullivan said, stepping aside to open the door. "Miss Keene is here at my request, and if she doesn't enter, the will remains sealed. Those are the terms." Sterling's jaw dropped. "What? Why would—" "Inside, all of you. Now." Sullivan's voice brooked no argument. They entered the grand library. It was a cavernous room filled with the smell of old paper and burning wood. A fire roared in the hearth. The room was packed. There was Julianne Vance, Sterling's aunt, a vulture of a woman who had been suing Arthur for years over family trusts. There was Marcus Thorne, Sterling's lawyer, looking ready for a fight. There were board members, cousins and hangers-on, but in the center of the room there were only 5 chairs arranged in a semicircle facing Sullivan's desk. "The seating arrangement is assigned," Sullivan announced. He pointed to the chairs. Sterling Vance. Sterling sat in the center, crossing his legs arrogantly. Tiffany St. Clair Vance. She sat to his right. Julianne Vance. She took the far right. Caleb Vance. Sterling's estranged brother, a recovering addict who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, took the far left. That left 1 chair, directly next to Sterling. "Alice Keene," Sullivan said. Sterling jumped up. "I am not sitting next to her. This is an insult to my wife." "Sit down, Sterling, or you forfeit your claim," Sullivan said, opening a leather folder. Sterling sat, fuming. He leaned toward Alice. "Enjoy the seat, honey, because once this is over, you're walking home." "Ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan began, putting on reading glasses. Arthur Vance was a man of many secrets. He built a logistics empire worth $4 billion. He knew that upon his death, the wolves would come. Sullivan looked directly at Sterling. He also knew that the people closest to him were often the furthest from his heart. "Skip the poetry, Sullivan," Sterling snapped. "Read the numbers. Who gets the company? Who gets the estate?" "Very well," Sullivan said. Article 1. "To my sister, Julianne, I leave my collection of antique stamps." Julianne gasped. "Stamps? I want the house in Martha's Vineyard. The stamps are valued at $12, Sullivan noted dryly. "Arthur knew you never wrote a letter in your life, but felt you should start." A few people in the back stifled giggles. Julianne turned purple. Article 2. "To my son, Caleb." Sullivan looked at the disheveled brother. "I leave the sum of $5 million to be held in a trust, accessible only upon the completion of a 2-year rehab program. I believe in you, son. Get clean." Caleb put his head in his hands and sobbed quietly. It was a mercy. "And now," Sullivan paused. The room went deadly silent. "To my eldest son, Sterling." Sterling straightened his tie. He squeezed Tiffany's hand. This was it. "The billions. Sterling, you were always good at business. Ruthless, efficient. You took the company I built and you made it profitable. But you also made it soulless." Sullivan read from the paper. "You divorced the only person who ever told you the truth. You surrounded yourself with sycophants. You blocked my calls to Alice. You thought I didn't know." Sterling's face went pale. "To Sterling Vance, I leave the control of the Vance Family Charitable Foundation." Sterling blinked. "The foundation? That's good tax write-offs. But what about the company? The stock? The controlling interest?" "I'm getting to that," Sullivan said. He turned the page. "The entirety of my remaining estate. The controlling 51% share of Vance Global, the Hamptons estate, the Manhattan penthouse currently occupied by Sterling Vance, and the patent portfolio." Sterling was leaning forward, sweating. "Yes? To who? Me and Tiffany?" Sullivan looked over the rim of his glasses. He looked at Alice. "I leave it all to the one person who never asked me for a dime. The one person who loved me for me. Not my wallet. My daughter-in-law, Alice Keene." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Sterling stood up so fast his chair fell over. "That's a lie!" he screamed. "She's not even family. We're divorced." "The will was updated 4 years ago, Sterling," Sullivan said calmly. "Before the divorce. However, Arthur added a codicil last week. It states, 'Even if Sterling is foolish enough to leave her, my opinion of her character stands. She is the moral compass of this family. She gets it all.'" "This is fraud," Marcus Thorne, Sterling's lawyer, shouted. "We will contest this. She coerced him." I have video logs of Arthur signing the will, sound of mind, Sullivan countered. And there is one more thing. Sullivan pulled a thick envelope from the folder. Sterling, you have been living in the Manhattan penthouse. The deed is now in Alice's name. Arthur's instructions are that you are to vacate the premises immediately. Alice sat frozen. She felt the blood rushing in her ears. She looked at Sterling. The arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated panic. He turned to her, his eyes wide. The monster who had thrown $100 bill in her water pitcher yesterday was now looking at her like she was a god. "Alice!" Sterling stammered, his voice cracking. "Honey, baby, we can fix this. We can talk about this." Alice slowly stood up. The room watched her. She smoothed her thrift store blazer. She looked at Tiffany, whose mouth was hanging open. She looked at the investors who had laughed at her. Then she looked at Sterling. "You're right, Sterling," she said softly. "We can talk." She leaned in close to his ear. "Talk to my lawyer." The elevator ride to the 50th floor of the Vance Global Tower took exactly 45 seconds. For Alice, it felt like a lifetime. She wasn't wearing the thrift store blazer anymore. Sullivan, Arthur's executor, had advanced her a personal stipend from the estate within hours of the will reading. "You need armor, Alice," he had said. "They are going to try to eat you alive." She wore a tailored charcoal suit, sharp and severe, with stiletto heels that clicked like gunfire on the marble floors. Her hair was down, blown out in soft waves, a stark contrast to the severe bun she had worn as a waitress just 48 hours ago. When the elevator door slid open, chaos erupted. The lobby of the executive suite was swarming. Employees were running with boxes. Phones were ringing off the hook. And standing in the middle of it all, barricaded inside the CEO's glass-walled office, was Sterling Vance. He had locked the door. Alice walked past the reception desk. The receptionist, a woman named Greta, who had once sneered at Alice when she brought Sterling lunch, dropped her phone. Miss Keene," Greta stammered. "Mr. Vance said, he said no one is allowed in." "Mr. Vance doesn't work here anymore, Greta," Alice said, not breaking stride. "Call security." Alice approached the glass doors. Inside, Sterling was shredding documents. He looked frantic, sweat staining the armpits of his dress shirt. He saw Alice and stopped. He walked to the glass and shouted something, but the soundproofing was too good. He held up a middle finger. Sullivan appeared at Alice's side, followed by 2 armed security guards and a locksmith. "He's destroying evidence," Sullivan noted grimly. "We need to breach." "No," Alice said. She held up a hand. "He wants a scene. He wants me to have him dragged out so he can sue for assault or public humiliation. He wants to be the victim." Alice turned to the receptionist. "Greta, cut the power to the executive suite, specifically the outlets in that office." I can't do that, Mom. The servers—" "Do it," Alice commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of 51% ownership. Greta typed a command. Inside the glass office, the shredder died. The lights flickered and went out, leaving Sterling standing in the grey daylight of the New York skyline. Alice walked to the intercom button on the wall. "Sterling," she said. Her voice was amplified into the room. "You have 5 minutes to walk out with your personal effects. If you don't, I'm calling the NYPD to report a break-in by a disgruntled former employee. And Sterling, I'll press charges." Sterling stared at her. He looked at the shredder, then at the door. He knew when he was beaten. He unlocked the door. The hallway fell silent as he stepped out. He carried a box containing a stapler, a photo frame, face down, and a stress ball. He walked up to Alice, looming over her. He was tall, intimidating, used to getting his way by physical presence alone. "You think you've won," he whispered, his eyes full of venom. "You have no idea what you've just walked into. This company is a beast, Alice. It eats weak people. You'll be begging me to come back and save it within a month." "I managed your life for 10 years, Sterling," Alice replied coolly. "I think I can manage your spreadsheets. Goodbye." "Escort him out," Sullivan ordered the guards. As Sterling was marched toward the elevators, the board of directors emerged from the conference room. These were the sharks Arthur had warned her about. 6 men and 1 woman, all in their 60s, all billionaires in their own right. They looked at Alice with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The chairman, a man named Richard Halloway, stepped forward. He had been Sterling's biggest supporter. "Ms. Keene," Halloway said, not offering his hand. "This is a cute display of power. But let's be realistic. You were a waitress on Tuesday. You cannot run a Fortune 500 logistics company. We have prepared a severance package. We will buy your shares at a 10% premium, and you can go live your life." Alice looked at Halloway. She remembered him. He had come to her wedding and hit on her bridesmaids. "10% premium?" Alice asked. "It's generous." Halloway nodded. "Take the money, girl. Don't drown yourself." Alice walked past him, into the conference room. She took the seat at the head of the table, Arthur's seat. She placed her phone on the table. "Sit down, gentlemen. And lady." They hesitated, but eventually they sat. "I've spent the last 48 hours reading the quarterly reports," Alice lied. She had actually spent the last 48 hours crying, sleeping, and then reading the summaries Sullivan had prepared. But they didn't need to know that. "Vance Global is over-leveraged in the Asian shipping market. Our fuel costs are up 15%, and our PR is a disaster because someone," she nodded toward the door Sterling had just exited, "spent company funds on a yacht scandal." The room went quiet. She knew the numbers. "I am not selling," Alice stated, "and I am not resigning. I am the CEO, and my first order of business is a complete forensic audit of the last 5 years. Halloway's face went pale. "An audit? That's unnecessary. It will spook the shareholders." "Why, Richard?" Alice leaned forward, channeling every ounce of Arthur Vance she could remember. "Are you hiding something?" Halloway tugged at his collar. "Of course not." "Good. Then you have nothing to worry about." Meeting adjourned. As the board members filed out, looking like they had just seen a ghost, Sullivan closed the door. He looked at Alice with a rare smile. "You did good, kid," he said, "but you just made a dangerous enemy. Halloway and Sterling were thick as thieves. If they team up—" "Let them," Alice said, her hand shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "I have the company. What can they do?" Sullivan looked out the window. "It's not about what they can do to the company, Alice. It's about what they did to the company that we haven't found yet." 1 week later. The honeymoon phase of being a billionaire lasted exactly 4 days. By day 5, Alice realized that Sterling hadn't just left her a company, he had left her a bomb. It was 2:00 a.m. Alice was in the penthouse, the same penthouse Sterling had kicked her out of 3 years ago. It felt strange to be back. The furniture was different. Tiffany had redecorated in gaudy gold and white velvet. But the view was the same. Alice sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes of financial records. Sullivan was asleep on the sofa. The poor man had been working 20-hour days with her. She was looking for the leak. Vance Global brought in billions in revenue, yet the cash reserves were almost empty. The money was vanishing. "It doesn't make sense," she muttered to herself, tracing a line on a spreadsheet. "Shipping container maintenance? $40 million? For a fleet that's only 2 years old." She pulled up the invoices on her laptop. They were billed to a company called Orion Maintenance Solutions, based in the Cayman Islands. She typed Orion Maintenance Solutions into the database. No website, no phone number, just a P.O. box. She dug deeper. She looked at the signatories for the checks, authorized by S. Vance, co-signed by R. Halloway. Alice felt a cold knot in her stomach. Sterling and the chairman of the board, Halloway, were draining the company. They were funneling millions into a shell company. But why? Sterling was rich. Why steal from his own inheritance? Unless... Alice scrambled to find the older files. She went back 5 years, 10 years. The payments to Orion didn't start 3 years ago when she left. They started 6 months ago, right around the time Arthur got sick. They knew, she whispered. They knew Arthur was dying, and they started looting the ship before it sank. She grabbed her phone to wake Sullivan, but suddenly her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Did you find it yet? The voice was distorted, robotic, a voice changer. Who is this? Alice demanded, standing up. It doesn't matter who I am. It matters what I know. You're looking at the Orion files, aren't you? Alice froze. She looked around the empty penthouse. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who left them for you to find. But you're missing the bigger picture, Alice. Orion isn't just theft. It's a bribe. A bribe for what? Check the cargo manifests for the maintenance ships, the Vance Star and the Vance Horizon. They aren't carrying auto parts. They're carrying something else. Something illegal. What are you talking about? Sterling didn't just run a logistics company. He was running a smuggling ring for the Petrov family. Russian organized crime. Why do you think the stock price was so high? It wasn't efficiency. It was dirty money. Alice's hand covered her mouth. This wasn't just corporate fraud. This was prison time. This was dangerous. Why are you telling me this? Because, the voice crackled. Sterling threw me away too, and I want to see him burn. But be careful, Alice. If you expose this, the stock goes to zero. The company collapses. You lose the billions. You lose the legacy. And the Petrovs. They don't sue people. They eliminate them. The line went dead. Alice stared at the phone. She looked at Sullivan, sleeping peacefully. She was holding a grenade. If she went to the FBI, Vance Global would be seized. The thousands of honest employees would lose their jobs. Arthur's legacy would be destroyed. She would be the CEO who killed the company. But if she stayed silent, she was an accomplice. The elevator chimed. Alice spun around. Security was supposed to be downstairs. No one could get up without a keycard. The doors opened. It was Tiffany St. Clair. But she didn't look like the confident model from the courtroom. Her mascara was running. She was wearing a trench coat over pajamas. She looked terrified. Tiffany? Alice asked, confused. Tiffany stepped out, her hands up in surrender. Don't call the police, please. How did you get up here? I still have a key card. Sterling, he forgot to deactivate it. Tiffany was shaking. Alice, you have to help me. Help you? You laughed while your husband threw money in my face. He's not my husband, Tiffany sobbed. We never married. It was a publicity stunt. And now he's going crazy. Tiffany reached into her bag. Alice flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, Tiffany pulled out a hard drive. He's planning to frame you, Tiffany whispered. He knows you'll find the Orion accounts. He planted your digital signature on the authorization files yesterday. He hacked your login. Alice's blood ran cold. What? He's going to call the FBI on you tomorrow morning, Tiffany said. He's going to say you were the mastermind. That you manipulated Arthur to get the company so you could continue the smuggling operation. He has emails, Alice. Fake emails from your account. Alice took the hard drive. "Why are you giving me this?" Alice asked. "Why turn on him?" Tiffany pulled down the collar of her trench coat. On her neck were dark, purple bruises. Finger marks. "Because," Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling, "when I asked him about the Russians, he did this. He's not just a jerk, Alice. He's a monster. And he's coming for you." Alice looked at the bruises, then at the hard drive, then at the city lights below. The war had begun, and Alice realized with a sinking feeling that she couldn't fight this in a boardroom. She couldn't fight this with lawyers. She had to fight dirty. "Wake up, Sullivan," Alice said, loud enough to rouse the sleeping lawyer. Sullivan sat up, blinking. "What? What is it? Is that Tiffany?" Alice slammed the hard drive onto the table. "Get the coffee," Alice said, her eyes burning with a new, dangerous fire. "We aren't waiting for the FBI. We're going to hold a press conference." "When?" Sullivan asked. "Now. We are on 1 a.m. Wake up the press. Tell them the Queen is clearing the board." The lobby of Vance Global was transformed into a war room. By 5:30 a.m., satellite trucks from CNN, Fox Business, and the BBC lined the streets of Manhattan. The rumor mill was spinning out of control. Why was the new CEO calling a press conference before the market opened? Was the company bankrupt? Was she resigning? Alice stood backstage in the makeshift media center they had set up in the atrium. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a lethal combination of caffeine and adrenaline. "They're ready," Sullivan said, adjusting his tie. He looked 10 years younger, energized by the fight. "Agent Reynolds from the FBI is stationed in the back. He's reviewed the hard drive Tiffany gave us. It matches the surveillance they've had on the Petrov family for months. They just needed the link to Sterling. You just handed them the smoking gun." "Where is Tiffany?" Alice asked. "Safe house," Sullivan replied. "She's the star witness. If this goes right, she gets immunity. If it goes wrong, it won't," Alice said, smoothing her skirt. "It ends today." She walked out onto the stage. The flashbulbs were blinding, a strobe light of white heat. Hundreds of reporters shouted her name. "Ms. Keene, is it true you're selling the company?" "Ms. Keene, comments on the plummeting stock." Alice stepped up to the podium. She raised a hand. The room quieted, the hum of cameras the only sound. "My name is Alice Keene," she began, her voice steady, amplified through the massive speakers. "And I am the CEO of Vance Global. For the last 3 years I was told I was nothing. I was discarded. But in my time away, I learned something valuable. Silence is not weakness. Silence is simply reloading." She motioned to the massive screen behind her. "Yesterday I was made aware of a plot to frame me for corporate embezzlement and international smuggling involving the Orion Maintenance Shell Company." A gasp went through the room. "The narrative was going to be simple," Alice continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until she found the camera broadcasting live. "That the bitter ex-wife manipulated a dying man to steal an empire, only to use it for crime. It's a compelling story, but it has one flaw." The screen behind her changed. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was grainy security footage from inside the Vance boardroom, dated 6 months prior. It showed Sterling Vance and Richard Halloway sitting with a man who was clearly identifiable as Andrei Petrov, a known associate of the Russian mob. In the video, Sterling was laughing. "The old man is dying, Andrei. Once he's gone, the routes are yours. We'll label the contraband as medical supplies. No one checks the humanitarian aid containers." The room erupted. Reporters were screaming into their phones. "This footage," Alice shouted over the noise, "was recorded by my late father-in-law, Arthur Vance. He knew. He installed hidden cameras before his illness took him. He knew his son was compromised. He left the company to me, not just because he loved me, but because he knew I was the only one with the moral courage to clean it up. Suddenly, the side doors of the atrium burst open. "Stop this!" Sterling Vance charged in, followed by his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, and 3 private security guards. He looked manic. His tie was undone, his eyes wild. "Turn that off!" Sterling screamed, pointing at the screen. "She faked it! It's AI! She's a liar!" He rushed the stage. The reporters parted like the Red Sea, hungry for the violence. "You think you can ruin me?" Sterling yelled, climbing the stairs to the podium. He grabbed Alice's arm, his grip bruising. "I built this. You're just a waitress." Alice didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She looked him dead in the eye. "I may have been a waitress, Sterling," she said, her voice caught by the microphone, broadcasting to millions. "But I served people. You only served yourself." "You're finished." Sterling raised his hand as if to strike her. "Federal agents, freeze!" The command boomed from the back of the room. A dozen men and women in FBI windbreakers swarmed the atrium, guns drawn. Sterling froze, his hand still raised. He looked at the agents, a confused smile on his face. "Thank God. Officer, arrest her. She's broadcasting corporate secrets. She's hacked the system." Agent Reynolds, a tall man with a face like granite, walked up the steps. He holstered his weapon and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. He walked right past Alice. He grabbed Sterling's wrist. "Sterling Vance," Reynolds recited, spinning him around and slamming him against the podium. "You are under arrest for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to traffic illegal goods. You have the right to remain silent." "What?" Sterling gasped. The wind knocked out of him. "No, check her hard drive. She's the one." "We have the hard drive, Mr. Vance," Reynolds said, tightening the cuffs. "Your wife, your ex-partner, Ms. St. Clair, walked it into our office 3 hours ago. She told us everything, including where you hid the offshore codes." Sterling's face went white. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Holloway, who was currently being tackled by 2 agents near the exit. Then he looked at Alice. For the first time in his life, Sterling Vance looked small. "Alice," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Alice, don't let them take me. The Petrovs. They'll kill me in prison. Please, I'm family." Alice adjusted the microphone one last time. "Family protects family, Sterling," she said softly. "But you fired your family 3 years ago." She turned to the security guards. "Get him out of my building." As Sterling was dragged away, screaming and kicking, the cameras turned back to Alice. She stood alone on the stage, the logo of Vance Global shining behind her. She looked tired. She looked sad. But she stood tall. "The trading markets open in 10 minutes. Alice announced to the stunned press. "Vance Global will be taking a hit today. But we will rebuild. We will be transparent. And we will be honest." She picked up her notes. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." 6 months later. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Vance Global, but inside the atmosphere was no longer cold and sterile. It was alive. Alice sat at the head of the boardroom table. The room was full, but the faces had changed. The old guard, the men who had sneered at her, the cronies who had helped Holloway plunder the accounts, were gone. In their place sat a diverse team of younger executives, operation managers she had promoted from the warehouse floor, and seasoned veterans who had been sidelined by Sterling for being too honest. "The audit is complete," Alice announced, sliding a blue folder across the table. "We have recovered 80% of the assets funneled into Orion. It's not everything, but it's enough to clear our debt and fund the expansion into green logistics." A murmur of approval went around the room. However, Alice raised a hand. "We have a surplus. The board's previous strategy was to use surplus for executive bonuses. I'm proposing a different allocation." She tapped the screen behind her. A new chart appeared. Employee Profit Sharing Program. Educational grants for staff families. "This company was built on the backs of people who were told they were replaceable," Alice said, her eyes meeting the gaze of the operations director, a man who had started as a truck driver 20 years ago. From now on, when Vance Global wins, everyone wins. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting adjourned, Alice walked back to her office. She didn't stop to admire the view. She stopped at the desk of Greta, the receptionist who had once been too terrified to let her in. "Greta, how is your mother?" Alice asked. She's much better, Miss Keene. The new insurance plan covered the surgery. I don't know how to thank you." "You thanked me by staying when the ship was sinking," Alice smiled. "Go home early today. Spend time with her." Alice entered her office. James Sullivan was waiting for her. He looked older, leaning heavily on his cane, but his eyes were bright. He held a thick stack of legal documents. "You're running a charity, not a corporation," Sullivan teased, though his tone was full of pride. "I'm running a legacy, James," Alice replied, taking a seat opposite him. "What's the news?" Sullivan sat down with a sigh. "The final sentencing hearing was this morning. I thought you'd want to know." Alice went still. "Sterling?" 15 years, Sullivan said, his voice grim. "Federal prison, and not the country club kind. Because of the connection to the Petrov syndicate, the judge wanted to make an example. He's in a maximum security facility in upstate New York." Alice looked out the window. She tried to find pity in her heart, but all she found was a quiet, dull ache for the years she had wasted loving a man who didn't exist. "Did he say anything?" "He tried," Sullivan said. "He tried to blame Holloway, then he tried to blame Tiffany, then he cried. It was pathetic, Alice. The man who strutted around this office like a god was reduced to a terrified child." "And Holloway?" 20 years, Sullivan replied. "RICO charges stick hard. He gave up every contact he had, but it didn't save him. The irony is, he's sharing a cell block with some of the very people he used to smuggle goods for. I don't imagine he'll have an easy time." Alice nodded slowly. The monsters were in cages, the castle was clean. "There is one more thing," Sullivan said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a creamy white envelope with a French postmark. Alice took it. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was loopy, almost childish, but the pressure on the pen was lighter now. Tiffany. Alice opened it. Inside was a photo of a small studio apartment in Paris, messy with fabric swatches and sketches, and a note. "Alice, I thought about writing to apologize again, but words are cheap. Sterling taught me that. You taught me that action is what matters. I'm working as a seamstress for a small label. I make coffee. I sweep the floors. My feet hurt every day, and I've never been happier. Thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance. I hope one day I can be half the woman you are. Tea." Alice smiled, a genuine soft smile. She placed the letter in her drawer. "She's going to be okay," Alice said. "Because you gave her a second chance," Sullivan noted. "You have a habit of doing that." "Arthur gave me a second chance," Alice corrected him. "Speaking of Arthur," Sullivan checked his watch. "The car is ready." The cemetery was on a cliff overlooking the grey Atlantic, the wind whipping the salt spray against the headstones. It was a private plot, reserved for the Vance family, though Sterling would never be buried here now. Alice stood before the black marble stone. Arthur Vance. Father. Visionary. She placed a single white rose on the grass. "I did it, Arthur. she whispered to the wind. "The company is safe. The rot is gone. But I'm tired." "He knew you would be," Sullivan said, stepping up beside her. "That's why he left you one last instruction. I wasn't allowed to give it to you until 6 months had passed." Alice frowned. "What instruction?" Sullivan handed her a small velvet box. Alice opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond or a key to a vault. It was a simple, rusted iron key, an old-fashioned house key. "What is this?" "Arthur bought a cottage," Sullivan explained. "In Maine, middle of nowhere. No internet, no stock tickers, just a library and the ocean. He bought it years ago, hoping to retire there. He never made it." Sullivan looked at her intently. His note said, "Alice will save the company because she is a warrior. But a warrior needs to rest. Tell her to take a month. The company won't fall apart if she steps away. If it does, she didn't build it right." Alice laughed, a sound that felt foreign in her throat after months of tension. Tears pricked her eyes. Even from the grave, the old man was parenting her. "A month?" Alice mused. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Sullivan said. "You have a good team. You built it. Trust them." Alice closed her hand around the cold iron key. She looked at the ocean. She thought about the brownstone in Brooklyn she had bought, a stepping stone. But Maine? Silence? Peace? That sounded like a dream. She looked back at Sullivan. "Pack your bags, James," she said. Sullivan blinked. "Me?" "You're the family lawyer," Alice grinned, linking her arm through his. "And you're the only family I have left. Someone has to beat me at chess by the fire." Sullivan chuckled, patting her hand. "I suppose I can clear my schedule." Alice looked back at the grave one last time. She didn't say goodbye. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement between two titans. She turned away from the cliff, walking back toward the car. The wind blew her hair back, exposing her face. Not the face of a victim, or a discarded wife, or even a vengeance seeker. It was the face of a woman who was finally, truly free. "Driver," Alice said, as she slid into the back seat. "Take us to the airfield. We're going to Maine." The car pulled away, leaving the dark clouds behind, driving toward a horizon that was finally bright. What a journey. Alice didn't just defeat Sterling. She dismantled the entire toxic world he built and replaced it with something real. She proved that true power isn't about how loud you can scream or how much money you can steal. It's about resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand up when everyone tells you to sit down. Arthur Vance saw the diamond in the rough, but Alice was the one who had to shine. I want to ask you a question. Do you think Tiffany deserved that second chance? Or should Alice have left her to the wolves like she did with Sterling? It's a tough one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your debates. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really supports the channel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have a new story coming next week about a billionaire who goes undercover as a janitor in his own company. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the truth always comes out in the will. Thanks for watching.